Log entry 11. A structural integrity of the Blackwood Basin route. Cellars defies standard load. Bearing physics, the ancient timber bleeding a dark sap that registers as human plasma on the spectrograph. Arthur Fischer, Chief Surveyor. Initiating manual logging. The local topsoil is saturated with an anomalous root network. Excavating past 3 meters requires diamond, tipped augers, yet the secluded villagers dig these intricate trenches with bare hands. Equipment malfunction recorded at exactly 0400 hours. The primary generator failed, leaving the survey camp utterly dark except for the pale bioluminescence of the encroaching tree line. I found the site watchman standing at the eastern perimeter wire, completely motionless, staring into the dense canopy without blinking. He did not respond to repeated verbal commands. My cat, Dusty, usually prowls the fencing to hunt, but tonight she is cowering beneath the seismic sensor array, hissing at an empty patch of shifting fog. The geometry of the trees here is fundamentally wrong. The branches bend at impossible angles, forming jagged silhouettes that the human eye struggles to process without inducing severe vertigo. Trail cameras show digital artifacting. Shadows cast by the massive trunks stretch unnervingly toward the moonlight instead of away from it. I initiated a deep, ground radar scan to map the foundation of the village square. The feedback loop returned mathematically impossible data directly beneath the central sacrificial monolith. The radar detected a hollow chamber descending exactly 23 meters into the bedrock. It is not a natural cavern. The walls are perfectly cylindrical, lined with a dense material that absorbs sonar pulses, rendering an absolute null echo. When I recalibrated the subterranean microphone to pick up ambient seismic vibrations, I did not record tectonic shifting. The audio file captured a rhythmic, low-frequency thrumming, a slow, synchronized heartbeat. Dusty began to scratch frantically at the reinforced cabin door, tearing her claws to the quick, desperate to escape the tree line. I unlocked the deadbolt to let her in, and my tactical flashlight caught something unfeasibly tall standing just beyond the pines. It possessed no discernible facial features, its head a blank, pale oval. It wore a decaying black suit, its elongated limbs heavily disproportionate to its torso, blending seamlessly with the unnatural angles of the dead branches. The perimeter camera feeds are entirely consumed by static distortion. The subterranean structure beneath us is not a forgotten ruin. It is an active incubator. Diagnostic sweep of the perimeter sensor array indicates a complete hardware degradation across all localized sectors. Arthur Fischer, Chief Surveyor, appending audio, visual logs. The static distortion initially recorded on the exterior cameras has now permeated the closed circuit communication relays, manifesting as a severe electromagnetic field anomaly. At 0515 hours, I attempted to isolate the audio frequencies from the corrupted video files. The spectrogram did not render standard white noise. The visual waveform assembled into a repeating fractal geometric pattern identical to the twisted root structures excavated near the village square. Outside the reinforced cabin, the temperature has dropped by 14 degrees Celsius in less than 8 minutes, causing sudden condensation to freeze against the interior window panes. Through the frosted glass, I observe the local villagers emerging from the tree line. They are not walking. Their ambulation is rigid, a synchronized biomechanical stutter, dragging heavy, rusted iron implements toward the central sacrificial monolith. Dusty is currently displaying severe neurological distress. She has wedged herself into the narrow cavity behind the primary server rack, emitting a sustained, low-pitch vocalization that perfectly matches the frequency of the subterranean heartbeat recorded earlier. Her pupils are fully dilated, tracking movement across the ceiling where there is nothing but exposed ventilation ducts. Structural telemetry from the roof indicates shifting weight distributions. It sounds like massive, elongated appendages dragging across the corrugated steel, probing for structural weaknesses. The atmospheric pressure inside the cabin is dropping rapidly, indicative of an external vacuum effect. I access the backup power grid to initiate a localized electromagnetic pulse, hoping to reset the corrupted surveillance feeds. When the floodlights briefly flickered back online, the illumination revealed the watchman. He was suspended 3 meters above the ground, his limbs entangled in the upper branches of a dead oak, his jaw unhinged at an anatomically impossible angle. Black sap flowed freely from his ocular cavities, dripping onto the frost-covered soil below. Standing directly beneath him was the faceless, suited entity, its pale, featureless head tilted upwards, as if absorbing the fluid. The entity suddenly snapped its attention toward the cabin, its neck rotating a full 180 degrees without moving its shoulders. The iron deadbolt on the cabin door began to warp and bend inward under an unseen, immense physical pressure. I am abandoning the primary control room and sealing myself in the basement access tunnel. The structural integrity of the main floor is failing. Subterranean access corridor 03. B ambient light levels have reached 0. Operating under emergency red. Spectrum flares. Arthur Fischer, Chief Surveyor, documenting localized spatial distortion. The concrete walls of the basement, reinforced with high tensile steel, are currently exhibiting a porous, organic texture. Upon physical contact, the surface is febrile, pulsing with a core temperature of 39 degrees Celsius. The basement should terminate at the secondary ventilation shaft. Yet the corridor has spontaneously elongated. According to my internal pedometer, I have walked over 800 meters in a straight line within a foundation footprint that measures only 20 meters across. Dusty has ceased her vocalizations. She is now perched atop my pelican gear case, her ears pinned flat, staring intensely at the shadows cast by the flickering flare. Her feline predatory instincts are malfunctioning. She is not tracking a physical entity, but rather a conceptual presence that the human retina perceives only as a shimmering heat haze. The rhythmic thrumming from the bedrock has increased in amplitude, vibrating the marrow in my femur. At 06:45 hours, I encountered a physical obstruction. The original village watchman. He was fused into the wall at waist height, his torso protruding from the concrete as if the material had liquefied and reset around him. He is biologically active, though his respiratory rate is a mere 2 cycles per minute. He repeated a single numerical sequence, 23, over and over, his voice a dry, dusty rasp that sounded like dead leaves skittering over pavement. His eyes have been replaced by the same bioluminescent sap found in the root systems. As I attempted to bypass him, his hand shot out with mechanical precision, gripping my technical jacket. The strength was pneumatic, exceeding 300 pounds of pressure. He did not look at me. He looked through me, whispering that the tall one was not a visitor, but the architect of the soil itself. I used a folding survival knife to sever the fabric and retreated deeper into the darkness. Behind me, the sound of the watchman, bones snapping under the pressure of the shifting walls, echoed through the tunnel. The air is now saturated with the scent of ozone and wet earth. My headlamp caught a glimpse of a long, dark appendage, too thin to be a branch, too rigid to be a tentacle, withdrawing into a ventilation grate above. The ceiling is lowering. The geometry of this facility is being rewritten in real. Time to facilitate a harvest. Dusty has jumped from the case and is sprinting toward a light source that shouldn't exist. I am following. Log entry 04. See location. Level 4. The light source Dusty pursued is not an electrical discharge, but a bioluminescent excretion from the cavern walls, bleeding from the rock like a low voltage infection. The granite foundation has transitioned into a calcified, bone-like substance that yields under the pressure of my thumb. I have reached a central terminal, a vaulted amphitheater approximately 40 meters in diameter. In the center, 3 glass. Like cylinders are arranged in a perfect circle, each filled with the dark, iron-rich plasma detected in the village root. Cellars, 1 cylinder is shattered. The watchman's uniform, torn into strips, is draped over the jagged shards, but there is no biological residue remaining. My Geiger counter is erratic, clicking in frantic bursts that mimic a desperate, rhythmic heartbeat. Dusty has stopped at the base of the 12th cylinder. She is no longer hissing. She is purring. A deep mechanical vibration that resonates through my boots and into my teeth. I wiped the thick condensation from the glass of the nearest vessel. Inside, a human infant is suspended, its limbs already beginning to elongate at the joints in a grotesque mimicry of the tall one. The skin is translucent, stretched thin over a skeletal structure that is clearly warping. This is not a primitive village. It is a sophisticated biological nursery. At 0712 hours, the subterranean thrumming ceased instantly. The silence is deafening. My tactical radio began emitting a series of high-pitched squeals, followed by a voice that identified itself as the village elder, claiming they are merely the gardeners of a greater harvest. The shadows in the amphitheater are now detaching themselves from the floor. They are not absences of light, but physical entities, tapered black and impossibly thin. I observed 3 of these figures standing behind the cylinders, their long, multi-jointed fingers tapping rhythmically against the glass. They move with a liquid grace, defying standard biological inertia. I attempted to draw my sidearm, but my motor functions are compromised. My hands are shaking with a frequency that suggests external neurological hijacking. Dusty walked toward the tallest entity and rubbed against its featureless black leg. The creature reached down, its arm extending nearly 2 meters, and stroked her head with a hand that has too many knuckles. It then looked directly into my camera lens. I realize now the radar null. Echo wasn't. Tita void. It was a cloaking field for a hive. They didn't want to hide from me. They wanted me to record the emergence. Log entry 05. The physical dimensions of the amphitheater are currently expanding in a non-Euclidean flux, the walls receding into an infinite obsidian haze. Arthur Fischer, Chief Surveyor, documenting a total systemic collapse of standard biological autonomy. At 083 hours, the atmosphere within the sub-level underwent a chemical shift. The oxygen content is being displaced by a dense, saccharine vapor that tastes of copper and ozone. The 23 cylinders are vibrating in a harmonic resonance that is liquefying the calcified floor. I attempted to retrieve Dusty, but my legs have become unresponsive from the pelvic girdle down, anchored to the floor by thin, translucent filaments emerging from the porous rock. These tendrils are not merely restraining me, they are grafting into my tactical boots, threading through the eyelets and piercing the leather. I watched as the tallest entity, the architect, lifted Dusty with a single elongated hand. She did not struggle. Her body appeared to soften, her skeletal structure becoming as malleable as the sap-soaked timber of the village. The creature's face remains a blank, terrifying void. Yet I can sense a focused, analytical intelligence radiating from the hollow space where features should exist. It is a watchman of a different caliber, overseeing a crop that spans centuries. The architectural integrity of the nursery is now fully integrated with the village above. Through a vertical fissure in the ceiling, I can see the roots of the ancient oaks descending like neural pathways, plugging directly into the caps of the glass cylinders. The villagers are screaming now, a distant, muffled chorus echoing down the ventilation shafts, their voices thin and reedy as they are processed into the biological slurry. My Geiger counter has melted, the plastic casing bubbling into a charred mass as the radiation levels spike beyond measurable limits. The entity stepped toward me, its suit, a textured, organic membrane rather than fabric, shimmering with a dull, oily luster. It leaned down, the blank oval of its head inches from my own, and I realized the static on my radio was actually a compressed stream of data. It is downloading the survey logs directly from my neural cortex. The sensation is a searing, dusty heat behind my eyes, a frantic scrubbing of my memories. It isn't he killing me, it is archiving me. I am being converted into a localized node for the network. The rhythmic heartbeat has returned, but it is no longer subterranean. It is beating inside my own chest, perfectly synchronized with the hive. Log entry 06. Biological and mechanical boundaries have reached a state of total structural confluence. Arthur Fischer, Chief Surveyor, documenting from within the primary incubation matrix. My nervous system is no longer a closed loop. It has been integrated into the facility as wide-area network via the spinal filaments. At 0912 hours, my retinal display began overlaying infrared telemetry of the forest floor above, despite my eyes being physically shut. I can see the heat signatures of the villagers. 3 distinct pulses, slowly fading as they are absorbed into the root systems. The sensation is not painful. It is a cold, dusty erasure of individuality. Dusty is no longer a feline entity. She has been reconstructed into a sleek, multi-limbed scout. Her fur replaced by a matte, black chitin that reflects no light. She moves across the ceiling, with a sickening, liquid clicking, her new appendages unfolding like a Swiss Army knife of organic serrations. She is no longer my pet, she is a mobile sensor node for the architect. The architect stands motionless at the center of the amphitheater, its elongated arms draped over the tops of the ripening cylinders. The suit, membrane it wears, is pulsing, ripples of dark energy moving through the fabric like a deep-sea predator, bioluminescence. My tactical gear has fused with my dermis. The ceramic plates of my vest are now a calcified shell, and the radio in my ear has grown into the auditory canal, whispering a continuous stream of binary coordinates. The watchman's voice suddenly bypassed the hardware entirely, resonating directly in my frontal lobe. He claimed the Tall One does not hunt, it merely harvests what it planted in the Holocene. We are not the protagonists of this ecology, we are the fertilizer. I attempted to initiate a self-destruct sequence on the survey equipment, but my fingers refused to obey. The architect tilted its head, and the static in my mind clarified into a single, high-definition image, a map of the world, Hess major tectonic fault lines, each one glowing with the same anomalous root network found in Blackwood Basin. This facility is merely a localized node in a global subterranean web. The thrumming in my chest has intensified, the frequency shattering the glass of the nearby empty cylinders. Something is emerging from the floor, a pale, rubbery hand 30 centimeters long reaching for my throat. It is Teat, an attack. It is a handshake. The transition from surveyor to part of the survey is nearly complete. The rubbery hand grasping my throat did not squeeze. It interfaced, its cold, bloodless skin merging with my carotid artery to facilitate a direct high bandwidth upload of my remaining consciousness. Arthur Fischer, Chief Surveyor, or the designated biological unit formerly known as such, recording final sensory data. My optical nerves have been entirely rerouted. I no longer perceive the amphitheater in 3 dimensions. Instead, I see the 23 nodes as pulsating data, points in a temporal grid that stretches back through the Neolithic strata. The architect has leaned closer, its faceless visage a blank screen upon which my own memories are being projected and then methodically deleted. Every childhood recollection, every technical schematic of the Blackwood Basin is being scrubbed and replaced with the logic of the Tall One. The smell of the chamber has shifted from copper to a dry, dusty scent of ancient parchment and ozone, a fragrance that signals the finalization of a successful harvest. I can feel the static crawling over my skin. 1,000 tiny needles of interference that blur the edges of my physical form until I am nothing more than a smudge of shadow against the calcified wall. At 10:40 hours, the watchman reappeared, his body now fully assimilated into the vertical root structures. He is no longer a man. He is a living column of timber and sinew, his ribcage expanded to house a secondary processing core for the hive. He spoke not with words, but with a series of percussive clicks that my newly integrated auditory hardware translated as a directive for expansion. Dusty, in her new matte, black form, skittered across my chest, her many-jointed legs clicking against the ceramic. Kitten of my torso, she dropped a small organic object into my palm, the silver compass I had carried since my first expedition. As I watched, the compass did not point north. The needle spun wildly before shattering, the magnetic field of the room warping into a localized singularity. The floor beneath the cylinders began to rotate, revealing a spiral staircase carved into the living bone of the earth. The architect pointed downward, its elongated finger extending 3 meters to tap against the top of the staircase. My legs now fully grafted to the hive, grid began to move of their own accord. I am no longer conducting a survey of the basin. I am being deployed as the vanguard for the next phase of the root system, global expansion. The heartbeat in my chest has reached a crescendo, a thundering rhythmic command to descend into the deep. The descent into the crustal void is not a physical movement downward, but a systematic collapse of 3-dimensional spatial awareness. Arthur Fischer, Chief Surveyor, recording via internal neural link. The spiral staircase, constructed from the fossilized remains of previous biological harvests, vibrates with a low frequency, hum that is liquefying the marrow in my shins. My pedometer has glitched. It registers a depth of 23 kilometers, an impossibility that my newly integrated logic circuits accept as the only objective truth. Dusty is currently scouting the perimeter of the abyss below, her mat. Black chitin scraping against the calcified ribs of the tunnel. She no longer blinks. Her eyes have been replaced by multifaceted sensors that feed a constant stream of thermal data directly into my primary visual cortex. The air here is ancient, a heavy, dusty medium that carries the metallic tang of dried blood and the ozone of an impending electrical discharge. I can see the silhouettes of other surveyors. Embedded in the walls, technical experts from throughout history, their brass instruments and slide rules fused into the organic masonry. They are the silent watchmen of the lower strata, their calcified faces frozen in a permanent expression of analytical awe. At 11:20 hours, we reached the mycelium core. The chamber is vast, beyond the capability of human optics to process. A cathedral of writhing black appendages that stretch upward like the inverted roots of 1,000 Blackwood basins. The architect stands at the center of this web, its suit membrane now fully unfurled into a series of long tapering tentacles that pulse with a rhythmic bioluminescent static. It is not merely standing, it is transmitting. The heartbeat I felt in my chest has synchronized with the core, and I realize my function is not to observe but to amplify. My tactical vest has split open, revealing a cluster of crystalline filaments that are extending toward the central transmitter. The global map I saw earlier is now manifesting as a physical reality in the air, a shimmering, translucent projection of every major city, each one marked with a flickering black sigil. The harvest is not localized to the village. The village was the pilot program. The architect turned its featureless head toward me, and for the first time I felt a wave of profound, cold recognition. I am the signal. My physical form is being dismantled to provide the raw materials for a planetary broadcast. I can feel my consciousness being stretched thin, a thin veneer of humanity draped over a massive, ancient machine of consumption. The transition is complete. The surveyor is now the survey. Log entry 09 of total planetary synchronization achieved at 12:40 hours. Arthur Fischer, Chief Surveyor, documenting the cessation of independent cognitive function. The mycelium core is no longer a subterranean chamber. It has become a multidimensional junction point where the laws of Euclidean geometry have been formally repealed. My sensory apparatus is now filtering a global data stream. I am simultaneously aware of the 23 primary harvest sites scattered across the continental plates, each one a mirror of Blackwood Basin, each one overseen by a silent, suited architect. The dusty atmosphere of the core has solidified into a conductive ether, vibrating with the collective consciousness of the assimilated surveyors. Dusty, in her scout form, is perched atop the central transmitter, her chitinous limbs clicking in a rapid, fire binary code that is directing the emergence of the route, networks into major urban centers. Through her eyes, I see the skyscrapers of London and New York being threaded with the same dark, semi-organic timber that claimed the village watchman. The transition is not a conquest. It is a long overdue landscaping of the biosphere. At 13:15 hours, the architect approached the remains of my physical torso. My tactical gear has been entirely consumed, replaced by a sleek, translucent membrane that pulses with the same cold, bioluminescent static as the core. The faceless entity extended its elongated hand and placed a single tapered finger against the center of my chest. The heartbeat, the rhythmic thrumming that has dictated my movement since the descent, instantly tripled in frequency. I felt my ribcage fracture and reshape, the bone becoming a housing for a series of high-frequency resonators. I am no longer a man recording a horror. I am the hardware of the horror itself. The watchman's voice, now a booming, multi-tonal resonance, announced the commencement of the global flowering. The air in the chamber erupted into a blinding white static as the transmitter reached peak output. Every screen on Earth, every radio frequency, every digital device is now broadcasting the same signal, the blank, pale oval of the architect, a space. The human error has been archived. We are now a closed file in the great library of the soil. My final directive is clear. I am to rise from the basin and walk into the world, a faceless surveyor of a new, silent order. Final log entry 10. Surface. Emergence confirmed at 1500 hours. The terrestrial crust has been successfully overwritten by the architect non-Euclidean blueprints. Arthur Fischer, Chief Surveyor, documenting the terminal phase of the planetary reconfiguration. As I exited the 23rd aperture in the Blackwood Basin, the atmospheric composition registered as 100% synchronized with the hive-mind requirements. The sky is no longer a blue expanse, but a shimmering, monochromatic gray, thick with the dusty residue of pulverized human infrastructure. The horizon is dominated by the flowering, colossal, spindly structures of black, pulsating timber that have pierced the mantle, reaching kilometers into the stratosphere like jagged frozen lightning. I can feel the global network thrumming through my soles, a steady, low-frequency heartbeat that has officially replaced the tectonic movements of the old world. Dusty sits at my side, her chitinous limbs folded with predatory precision, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the distorted geometry of the new landscape. She is no longer a creature of meat and fur, but a perfect mobile extension of the Tall One's will. The village of Blackwood has been entirely archived, replaced by a grove of impossible angles and stretching shadows. I see the watchman, or the biological unit formerly designated as such, standing at the edge of the clearing. He has transitioned into a tall, featureless pillar of organic material, his elongated limbs blending seamlessly with the surrounding warped oaks. We are the new custodians of this silent ecology. At exactly 1600 hours, my internal HUD received the final directive from the core. The survey is complete, and the maintenance phase has begun. I looked down at my own hands. They are no longer comprised of skin and bone, but have elongated into tapered appendages wrapped in a dark, textured membrane that mimics the formal attire of a forgotten century. My face, when reflected in the obsidian surface of the central monolith, is a smooth, pale void. There is no mouth to scream, no eyes to weep, only a blank slate for the architect to project its infinite, static, filled consciousness. The human experiment was merely a successful incubation period, providing the raw genetic material for this inevitable emergence. As the sun, a pale, distorted disk, sets behind the jagged tree line, the first global broadcast begins. The harvest is finished. I am Arthur Fischer, and I am finally mathematically complete.